Welcome to John Carter Stories. My name is John Carter. I'm 69 years old and I'm about to tell you how my dying wife left me the most powerful weapon I've ever held. Not a gun. Not money. Something far more devastating. For 47 years I gave everything to our family bakery, a small corner shop on Riverside and 3rd that made the best sourdough bread in all of Oregon. I thought my son-in-law, Trevor, understood what that place represented. But all he saw were dollar signs where I saw my soul. At my beloved wife Grace's funeral, in front of nearly 200 people who came to say goodbye, Trevor did something I'll never forget. He stood up, raised his glass to honor her memory, his voice dripping with false emotion. Then, as everyone was wiping their tears, he walked over to me, placed a thick folder in my trembling hands, and told me it was time to sign over the bakery as my retirement present to myself. Please subscribe and like this video and listen to my story till the end. Let me know which city you're listening from. That way I can see how far my story has traveled. When I refused, when I said, "No, Trevor, not today, not ever," his whole face changed. The mask slipped. He grabbed my wrist, his fingers digging into my skin so hard I gasped. I tried to pull away, stumbled backward, and crashed into the memorial table where Grace's portrait sat surrounded by white roses. The sound of that frame hitting the floor, glass exploding into 1,000 pieces, it echoed through that church hall like a gunshot. Everything stopped. The soft piano music. The whispered conversations. Even the crying. Everything went silent. I looked down at my wife's photograph lying there in the broken glass, her gentle smile unchanged, her eyes still full of love and faith in me. My hands were shaking as I bent down, ignoring the sharp edges, and picked up her picture. A piece of glass sliced my palm open, blood dripping onto the white tablecloth, but I barely felt it. I held that photograph against my chest, felt my heart hammering beneath it, and looked at my daughter Rachel's face. She was frozen there, one hand over her mouth, her eyes wide with horror and confusion. She had no idea what her husband had just done. No idea what he'd been doing for years. I didn't say a word. Didn't yell. Didn't accuse. I simply turned and walked through that crowd of mourners. They parted like the Red Sea, every face staring at me, some pitying, some confused, some angry at what they thought was an old man's clumsiness. Trevor's voice followed me, smooth and concerned, telling everyone I wasn't well, that grief was making me unstable, that I needed rest. But I kept walking. Out the door. Into the November rain that soaked through my coat in seconds. I didn't care. I walked to my truck at the far edge of the parking lot and sat there, holding Grace's picture, watching the rain blur the windshield. The anger I felt wasn't hot and explosive. It was ice cold. Patient. Methodical. It was fuel. I drove home in a daze. The house felt impossibly empty. Her reading glasses still sat on the side table. Her coffee mug, the one with the faded flowers, still in the dish rack. The faint scent of her lavender hand cream lingering in every room. But Grace had told me what to do. 3 days before she passed, when the cancer had stolen almost everything from her except her sharp mind, she grabbed my hand with surprising strength. Her voice was barely a whisper, but every word was crystal clear. "Marcus," she said, "the cedar box in our closet. Behind my winter coats. Open it when a man shows you who he really is. Believe him the first time." I went straight to our bedroom, pushed aside those coats that still smelled like her perfume, and pulled out the cedar box I'd made for her 30 years ago. My hands trembled as I set it on the bed and lifted the lid. What I found inside changed everything. The first item was a small leather journal, worn at the edges. I opened it and saw Grace's beautiful handwriting filling page after page. But these weren't memories or love letters. This was a ledger. A record of every single time Trevor had come to us with his hand out and his excuses ready. March 12, 2021. $9,500. Trevor said it was for a business opportunity that couldn't fail. Promised to repay in 6 weeks. May 8, 2021. $14,000. Emergency medical bills for his mother. Said insurance wouldn't cover it. August 30, 2021. $7,200. Car accident. Needed immediate repairs. On and on it went. Entry after entry. Promise after promise. And not a single dollar ever paid back. At the bottom of the last page, Grace had circled the total in red ink. $97,500. Nearly $100,000. Our entire retirement savings. Money we'd earned through 47 years of 4 a.m. mornings and midnight cleanup shifts. Gone. I felt like I couldn't breathe. Beneath the journal was a flash drive. With shaking hands, I plugged it into our old computer. The folder that opened was labeled Trevor Mitchell Financial Records. Inside were bank statements showing accounts in the negative, credit card bills and collections, investment portfolios that had crashed and burned, legal documents from creditors threatening lawsuits. Trevor wasn't just greedy, he was desperate, drowning in debt. The bakery wasn't something he wanted. It was the life raft he needed to save himself. But Grace had seen it all. Somehow, while she was dying, while she was fighting cancer and losing, she'd been protecting me. Protecting us. I sat there in the dark, tears streaming down my face, and whispered, "How, Grace? How did you know?" And that's when I found the next item in the box. A tiny digital recorder. I pressed play and Trevor's voice filled the quiet room, smooth and manipulative. "Grace, please. You have to be realistic. Marcus is a wonderful baker, but he's old. He's tired. That property is worth millions and he's letting it sit there making pennies. When he's gone, and let's face it, at his age that could be any day now, Rachel will inherit a failing business and crushing debt. Is that what you want for your daughter?" Then I heard Grace's voice. Weaker than I'd ever heard it, but filled with steel. "That bakery isn't property, Trevor. It's our life. It's our legacy. And Marcus isn't going anywhere." My answer is no. "And if you ever try to go behind his back again, I promise you'll regret it." The recording ended. I sat there alone, crying in a way I hadn't cried even when she died. Because she'd known. She'd seen through him from the beginning. And while she was dying, she'd been fighting for me. But the most devastating item was still at the bottom of that cedar box. A thick manila envelope sealed with red wax. On the front, in Grace's handwriting, "Partnership Agreement and Right of First Refusal, Northwest Heritage Hospitality Group." My hands were shaking so badly I could barely break the seal. What I found inside was pure genius. Inside that envelope was a legal contract, dense with terms I barely understood at first. But as I read through it, as the pieces started fitting together, I realized what Grace had done. What she'd been planning while I'd been too blind to see the danger we were in. 5 years ago, without telling me, Grace had reached out to Northwest Heritage Hospitality Group. I knew the name. Everyone in the restaurant business knew that name. David Chin had started as a line cook in Seattle 30 years ago. Now he ran one of the most respected restaurant groups on the West Coast, dedicated to preserving independent family businesses from being swallowed by developers and chains. Grace had negotiated a partnership. Our bakery was designated as a protected heritage site in their preservation program. In exchange for maintaining our original recipes and family character, they'd invested in modernizing our equipment and training our staff. I vaguely remembered new ovens being installed, but Grace had told me it was a grant program. I'd been so busy with the daily operations I'd never questioned it. But that wasn't the brilliant part. That wasn't the sword she'd left me. There was a clause buried in the middle of the contract that made my breath catch in my throat. In the event that ownership of Webb's family bakery is transferred, sold, or conveyed to any individual not bearing the Webb family name without express written consent from Northwest Heritage Hospitality Group, the group shall have the exclusive right to purchase said property at a predetermined price of $450,000. I read it 3 times before the full impact hit me. If Trevor ever managed to manipulate or force me into signing over the bakery, if he ever got his hands on that deed, he wouldn't be able to sell it to his developers for the millions he'd promised his creditors. The moment ownership changed hands, Northwest Heritage's rights would activate automatically. They'd purchase it for less than $500,000. Trevor would be left holding nothing but his debts. Grace hadn't just protected the bakery. She turned it into a trap. A beautiful, perfect trap. I pulled out my phone with trembling fingers and called my attorney, James Sullivan. We'd known each other for 25 years. He'd handled everything from our business contracts to our wills. I'd trusted him with my life, and more importantly, Grace had trusted him with her secrets. The phone rang 4 times. It was nearly midnight. "Marcus." His voice was groggy but immediately alert when he heard the tears in my voice. "What's wrong? What happened?" "Grace," I managed to say. "She left me something. I need you to see this. Tonight. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He arrived in 15, still in his pajamas with a coat thrown over them. I showed him everything. The journal with its devastating list of unpaid loans. The flash drive full of Trevor's financial disasters. The recording of Trevor trying to manipulate a dying woman. And finally, the contract with Northwest Heritage. James examined each piece with the careful attention of a surgeon. He was quiet for so long I started to worry. Finally, he looked up at me, and I saw something I'd never seen in his gentle eyes before. Cold fury. "Marcus," he said slowly, "your wife was playing 3-dimensional chess while Trevor was playing checkers. This is airtight. The partnership agreement is filed with the county, registered with Northwest Heritage's corporate office, and embedded in the property deed itself. There's no way around it. He tapped the journal. And this, combined with that recording, establishes a clear pattern of financial elder abuse. Trevor didn't just try to steal your bakery. He systematically drained your life savings while your wife was dying of cancer. That's not just unethical. That's criminal. What do we do? My voice sounded strange, hollow. James smiled, but it wasn't his usual warm smile. We make a phone call. He contacted Northwest Heritage's legal team the next morning. The message was simple and direct. Their Cornerstone, Oregon property in the preservation program was under immediate threat from a hostile party engaged in elder financial abuse. They responded within 2 hours. What I didn't know then, what James would tell me later, was that Northwest Heritage had been quietly watching Trevor for months. His failed investments had rippled through the Pacific Northwest business community like poison, leaving angry creditors and broken partnerships in their wake. When they learned he'd married into our family, they'd started building their own file on him. Our call was the missing piece they'd been waiting for. 1 week later, I found myself in a gleaming conference room on the 19th floor of a building in downtown Portland. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Willamette River. James sat beside me, his briefcase full of evidence. Across the polished table sat David Chin himself, a man in his early 60s with kind eyes and hands scarred from decades in professional kitchens. "Mr. Webb," he said warmly, reaching across to shake my hand. "Grace spoke of you often. She was an extraordinary woman." My throat tightened. "You knew her well?" "We met quarterly for the past 5 years. She wanted to make sure every detail of the protection agreement was perfect. She knew someone would come for your legacy eventually." He paused. "She just hoped she'd be here to see them fail." The conference room door opened and Trevor walked in. He looked terrible. His usually immaculate suit was wrinkled, his tie crooked, stubble darkening his jaw. The confident man who'd grabbed my arm at Grace's funeral looked like he hadn't slept in days. His eyes were bloodshot, his skin pale. He froze when he saw me sitting there. "What is this?" His voice cracked. "Marcus? What are you doing here? I thought this was about refinancing my—" "Mr. Mitchell," David Chin stood, his voice calm but carrying absolute authority. "Please sit down." Trevor's eyes darted around the room. From me to James to David to the stack of folders on the table. I watched understanding dawn slowly on his face, watched the color drain away until he looked like a ghost. "No," he whispered. "No, this isn't, you can't." David Chen's voice cut through his panic like a blade. "Mr. Mitchell, I'm going to be very direct with you. We've been made aware of your attempts to fraudulently acquire Webb's family bakery through financial manipulation and psychological abuse of its owner. We've also been provided with extensive documentation of your financial situation." James opened his briefcase with deliberate slowness and began laying items out on the table. The journal showing $97,500 in unpaid loans. The spreadsheets detailing Trevor's debts to dozens of creditors. The recording of him trying to manipulate Grace on her deathbed. Trevor's hands started shaking violently. "You can't. Those are private. You have no right to." "We have every right," David said calmly. "Mrs. Grace Webb was a legal partner in Northwest Heritage Hospitality Group. Your attempts to acquire her protected property through fraud triggered multiple legal protections. And these documents were provided to us by the victim of your financial abuse." He gestured to me. He slid a thick document across the table. "This is a summary of your outstanding debts as of this morning. As you can see, Northwest Heritage Hospitality has acquired every single one of them." Trevor stared at the paper. His mouth opened and closed silently. He looked like a fish drowning in air. "Your assets are frozen pending investigation," David continued in that same calm, deadly voice. "Your employment with every company in our business network has been terminated. And our legal team is coordinating with state authorities regarding potential criminal charges of elder abuse, fraud, and theft." I spoke for the first time, my voice quiet but steady. "Trevor." He looked at me and for the first time I saw real fear in his eyes. The kind of fear that comes from watching your entire world collapse in real time. "You called me old and tired," I said. "You said I wasn't thinking clearly. You pushed me into my wife's memorial table and shattered her photograph in front of everyone we knew." My voice broke slightly but I pushed through. "But Grace saw you. She saw what you really were from the very beginning. And she spent the last years of her life making absolutely certain you could never destroy what we built together." I stood up slowly. James gathered our documents. "I'm going home now. To my bakery. To the life Grace and I created with our own hands. And you, Trevor, are never going to touch it. You're never going to touch my family again. I walked out without looking back. The hallway seemed impossibly long. My legs felt weak. But I kept walking until I reached the elevator, until the doors closed, until I finally let myself lean against the wall and breathe. James put a hand on my shoulder. She would be so proud of you, Marcus. I nodded, unable to speak. The weeks that followed were strange and quiet. James handled all the legal complications. Trevor's world imploded piece by piece. His creditors circled. His business associates scattered. I heard through mutual friends that Rachel had filed for divorce. I wanted to call her. Every single day I picked up my phone and stared at her number. But I always put it back down. She needed to find her own way back to me. Just like Grace had known she would. One morning in late December, I was at the bakery before dawn, the way I'd been doing for 47 years. The kitchen was my sanctuary, the only place where my grief felt manageable. I was kneading dough for the morning sourdough loaves, my hands working in the rhythm Grace had taught me decades ago. The back door opened quietly. Soft footsteps on the tile floor. I looked up and saw my daughter standing in the doorway. Rachel looked so different. Thinner, her clothes hanging loose. Her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail instead of the elaborate styles Trevor had always insisted on. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying, her face bare of makeup. She looked exhausted. Broken. And absolutely beautiful. "Dad," she whispered, her voice cracking. Can I come in? What happened next will stay with me forever." I didn't say, "I told you so." I didn't say, "Where have you been?" I didn't say any of the things I'd rehearsed in my head during those long, lonely weeks. I just opened my arms. Rachel ran to me like she was 7 years old again, crashed into my chest and started sobbing. Deep, wrenching sobs that shook her whole body. Her tears soaked through my flower-covered shirt. Her hands clutched at my back like she was afraid I'd disappear. I held her tight, my own tears falling into her hair, and let her cry. Sometimes words don't heal. Sometimes you just have to hold on. "I'm so sorry," she finally managed between sobs. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I was so blind. I believed everything he said. Everything. He told me you were getting senile, that you were making bad decisions, that we needed to protect you from yourself. And I believed him because you loved him," I finished gently. "Because that's what love does. It makes us want to believe the best in people, even when the truth is staring us in the face." She pulled back, her face blotchy and wet. "How can you not hate me? I let him treat you that way. I let him hurt you. I let him disrespect Mom while she was dying." Her voice broke completely. "I didn't even know he'd been taking your money. $97,000, Dad. He stole $97,000 from you and Mom, and I had no idea." I cupped her face in my hands, my thumbs wiping away her tears the way I'd done 1,000 times when she was small. "Your mother knew you'd find your way back. She told me so right before she passed. She said, 'Rachel's stronger than she knows. When she finally sees the truth, she'll come home. Just make sure the door is always open.'" Rachel's face crumpled. "She knew? Even then she knew I'd figure it out?" "She knew the girl we raised," I said softly. "The girl who used to wake up at dawn on Saturdays to help me bake cinnamon rolls. The girl who insisted on hand-decorating every single cookie for the Christmas rush because she said they should all be special. That girl was still in there, sweetheart. Just temporarily lost." I walked to the shelf where I'd kept Grace's old apron folded and untouched since her death. The one with the faded blue flowers and the small burn mark from when she'd laughed so hard at one of my jokes that she'd touched a hot pan. My hands trembled as I held it out to Rachel. She stared at it, tears streaming down her face. "I can't. I don't deserve." "The kitchen forgives," I interrupted gently. "That's what your mother always said. It doesn't hold grudges about the fallen soufflés or the burnt bread. It only cares about what you're willing to create today." I pressed the apron into her hands. "And I forgive you, Rachel. I forgave you the moment you walked through that door." She held the apron against her chest and cried harder. But slowly, with shaking hands, she tied it around her waist. The same way she'd done hundreds of times as a teenager. The same way Grace had done for 47 years. I handed her a ball of sourdough dough, still warm from its first rise. "Come on," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I'll teach you how to make your mother's famous sourdough. The secret is in how you fold it. Grace said the dough can feel your emotions. If you're angry or rushed, it never rises right. But if you pour love into it..." I paused, remembering my wife's hands moving with such grace and confidence. If you pour love into it, you can taste it in every bite. We worked side by side in comfortable silence, our hands moving in rhythm. The eastern sky slowly lightened outside the windows. The ovens warmed. The kitchen filled with the yeasty, hopeful smell of bread coming to life. "Trevor's gone, you know," Rachel said quietly after a while. "Completely gone. He left town 3 days after that meeting in Portland. Didn't even tell me he was leaving. Just disappeared. His lawyer said he's moved somewhere back east, trying to start over with whatever scraps he has left." I nodded but didn't say anything. "I found things," she continued, her voice hollow. "After he left. Documents hidden in his office. More loans I knew nothing about. Credit cards in my name that he'd maxed out. He'd even tried to take out a second mortgage on our house without telling me." She laughed bitterly. "The house I bought with money from my grandmother. He was going to steal that too." "I'm sorry you're going through this," I said honestly. "I wouldn't wish this pain on anyone. Especially not my daughter." She looked at me with such raw gratitude. "How are you so kind? After everything?" "Because your mother taught me that holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die." I shaped my dough into a smooth ball. "And because I have my daughter back. That's worth more than any amount of money Trevor could have stolen." We baked together as the sun came up, painting the kitchen in shades of gold. When the first customers started arriving, their faces lit up with surprise and joy to see Rachel behind the counter again. Mrs. Henderson, who'd been coming to our bakery for 30 years, actually cried. Old Mr. Patterson hugged Rachel so tight he lifted her off her feet. "Welcome home, sweetheart," he said. "We missed you." Over the following months, Rachel and I rebuilt our relationship and our business. She had Grace's instincts for baking, that mysterious ability to taste something and know exactly what it needed. A pinch more salt. A touch more vanilla. A few more seconds in the oven. She threw herself into learning every recipe, working 12-hour days without complaint. "I have so much time to make up for," she told me one evening as we cleaned the kitchen together. "So many years I wasted with him." "You didn't waste them," I corrected gently. "You learned from them. There's a difference." One crisp autumn afternoon, about 8 months after that first morning Rachel came back, a sleek black car pulled up outside the bakery. David Chin stepped out, looking sophisticated in a charcoal suit but somehow still approachable. He'd called ahead, so I'd saved us a table on the small patio out back where Grace had loved to sit and watch the sunset. I brought out a selection of our best items. Fresh sourdough, apple turnovers, lemon bars, and 2 cups of strong coffee. "Marcus," he said warmly, shaking my hand. "And you must be Rachel. Your mother spoke of you with such love." Rachel's eyes widened. "You knew my mom?" "We met regularly for 5 years, David said, settling into his chair. "She was brilliant. Sharp as a tack. We discussed business strategy, property law, ways to protect family legacies from corporate predators." He smiled sadly. "I miss our meetings." She always brought samples from the bakery. Her cinnamon rolls were extraordinary. We talked for hours. About Grace, about the bakery, about Trevor's complete financial collapse. David told us that Northwest Heritage had decided not to pursue criminal charges after Trevor fled the state and declared bankruptcy. It seemed cruel to pile on when the man had already lost everything, David explained. Grace's goal was never revenge. It was protection. And she succeeded perfectly. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, David raised his coffee cup. To Grace Webb. A woman who understood that the greatest strength isn't in fighting battles, but in making sure the battles can never be fought in the first place. Rachel and I raised our cups to meet his. The coffee was rich and warm and tasted like home. That night, after David left and the bakery was locked up tight, Rachel and I sat together in the quiet kitchen. Just the two of us and 47 years of memories living in the walls around us. "Dad," Rachel said softly, "can I ask you something?" "Anything, sweetheart." "Do you think Mom knew she was dying when she set up that partnership with Northwest Heritage?" I was quiet for a long moment, remembering. "I think she suspected. The cancer markers were showing up in her blood work earlier than the doctors realized. And your mother was always smarter than any of us gave her credit for." I smiled through my tears. She saw Trevor for what he was years before I did. She saw the danger coming. And instead of warning me, which she knew I might not believe, she built an invisible fortress around everything we'd created together. Rachel wiped her eyes. "I wish I could tell her thank you. I wish I could tell her I'm sorry for not seeing it sooner." "She knows," I said with certainty. "Wherever she is, she knows. And she's proud of you for finding your way back." We sat in comfortable silence, listening to the old building settle around us, and I felt Grace's presence as clearly as if she were sitting right there with us. The story could have ended there. But life, as I've learned, always has one more chapter waiting. 6 months after that autumn afternoon with David Chin, I was arranging fresh bread in the display case when the bell above the door chimed. I looked up and froze. Trevor stood in the doorway. He looked nothing like the polished, arrogant man who'd grabbed my arm at Grace's funeral. His expensive suit was gone, replaced by worn jeans and a faded jacket. He'd lost weight, his cheeks hollow, dark circles under his eyes. His hair, once perfectly styled, was longer and unkempt. He looked broken, defeated, almost unrecognizable. Rachel had gone to the bank to make the deposit. We were alone. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The morning rush had ended, and the bakery was quiet except for the soft jazz playing from the old radio in the corner. "Marcus," he said finally, his voice hoarse, "I know I have no right to be here. I know you probably want to call the police the second you see me. I wouldn't blame you." He swallowed hard. "But I needed to say something before I leave town for good." "You already left town?" I said carefully, my hand moving slowly toward the phone beneath the counter. "What are you doing back here?" "Closing out the last pieces of my old life. Signing final divorce papers. Meeting with bankruptcy attorneys." He laughed bitterly. "Turns out running away doesn't solve anything. It just gives you more time to think about all the ways you destroyed your own life." I didn't respond. Just watched him waiting. Trevor took a shaky breath. "I came to apologize. Not because I think it'll fix anything. Not because I expect forgiveness. But because Grace deserved better. You deserved better. Rachel deserved better." His voice cracked. "I was drowning, Marcus. In debt, in bad decisions, in this desperate need to appear successful while everything was falling apart. And instead of asking for help, instead of being honest, I became a monster. I manipulated. I stole. I hurt the people who only ever showed me kindness." He reached into his pocket and I tensed. But he just pulled out an envelope, worn and creased like he'd been carrying it for months. "I can't pay you back the $97,000. I don't have anything left. But this." He placed the envelope on the counter between us. "This is a promissory note. A legal acknowledgement of my debt to you, signed and notarized. It means if I ever have anything again, you're first in line to collect. It's not much, but it's something." I stared at the envelope but didn't touch it. Trevor's eyes were wet. "I destroyed my marriage to your daughter. I destroyed any chance of having you as family. I destroyed everything good in my life because I was too proud and too scared to admit I was failing." He wiped his eyes roughly. "Grace tried to warn me. That recording you played in David Chen's office, that wasn't the only conversation we had. She told me once that character is what you do when no one's watching. And she said I was showing her every day what my character really was." His voice broke completely. She was right. About everything. And I was too arrogant to listen. I found myself speaking before I'd fully decided what to say. "Where are you living now?" "A friend's couch in Eugene. I'm working at a restaurant there. Washing dishes, actually." He laughed without humor. "Turns out that's about all I'm qualified for when your reputation is destroyed and you have no money left. But it's honest work. And after years of lying and scheming, honest work feels like..." He struggled to find the words. "It feels like the first real breath I've taken in a decade." I studied his face, looking for the manipulation, the angle, the hidden agenda. But all I saw was exhaustion and genuine remorse. "I should hate you," I said quietly. "You tried to steal my life's work. You physically assaulted me at my wife's funeral. You drained our retirement savings with lies and empty promises. By all rights, I should tell you to get out of my bakery and never come back." Trevor nodded, tears streaming down his face. "I know. I deserve that and worse. But Grace taught me something about forgiveness," I continued. "She said that forgiving someone doesn't mean what they did was okay. It doesn't mean you trust them again or let them back into your life. It just means you stop letting their actions poison your future." I paused, feeling the weight of the decision. "So I forgive you, Trevor. Not for you. For me. Because I'm tired of carrying anger around like a stone in my chest." He stared at me, shock written across his face. "How can you, after everything I did?" "Because my wife spent her dying days making sure you couldn't destroy what we built. And she succeeded. You have no power over me anymore, Trevor. You're just a sad, broken man who made terrible choices and has to live with the consequences." I picked up the envelope he'd left on the counter. "I'll keep this. And if you ever do get back on your feet, I expect payment. Not because I need the money but because you need to make amends. It's part of healing. Trevor nodded, unable to speak. But Trevor, I added, my voice firm, this doesn't mean you're welcome in my life or my daughter's life. This doesn't erase what you did. You're forgiven, but you're also done here. Do you understand? Yes, he whispered. Thank you, Marcus. You're a better man than I ever was. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. For what it's worth, Grace was the smartest person I ever met. And you, washing dishes at 5 a.m., still covered in flour at 70 years old, you're the richest man I know. I was too stupid to see it until I'd lost everything. The bell chimed as he left. Through the window, I watched him walk slowly down the street, his shoulders hunched, disappearing into the autumn morning. I stood there for a long time, holding that envelope, feeling something shift inside me. Not forgetting. Never forgetting. But finally letting go. When Rachel returned from the bank, she immediately knew something had changed. Dad? Are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. Not a ghost, I said. Just a man paying the price for his choices. I told her about Trevor's visit, about his apology, about the promissory note. Rachel's face went through a dozen emotions. Anger. Hurt. Surprise. And finally something like relief. Did you accept his apology? I forgave him, I clarified. That's not quite the same thing. But yes, I needed to let it go, sweetheart. For my own peace. She hugged me tight. Mom would be proud of you. She'd be proud of both of us, I corrected. We survived. We rebuilt. We're still here, still baking bread at dawn, still feeding this community the way we've done for almost 50 years. That's the real victory, Rachel. Not revenge. Not punishment. Just continuing to exist and thrive despite everything he tried to take from us. That evening, as we locked up the bakery, I found myself talking to Grace the way I often did when I was alone. You were right about everything, love. About Trevor. About Rachel finding her way back. About forgiveness being the only path to peace. I touched the wall of the bakery, feeling decades of memories soaked into the old brick. I miss you every single day. But I can feel you here. In every recipe. In every customer's smile. In every sunrise over the ovens. You're still here with me. A year later, on the anniversary of Grace's death, Rachel and I did something we'd been planning for months. We hung a new sign in the bakery's front window, right next to the original Webb's Family Bakery ST 1976 sign. The new sign was simple and elegant, with Grace's name engraved in beautiful script. Grace's Corner, in loving memory of Grace Webb, whose wisdom and strength built a legacy that cannot be broken. We transformed a small alcove near the window into a cozy reading nook with comfortable chairs, free coffee, and shelves full of books available for anyone to read or borrow. A small plaque explained that Grace had always believed the bakery should be more than just a business. It should be a gathering place, a sanctuary, a home. The community response was overwhelming. People we'd known for decades stopped by with stories about Grace. How she'd given them free bread when they were struggling. How she'd listened to their problems over coffee. How she'd made them feel seen and valued when the rest of the world made them feel invisible. Mrs. Henderson brought a framed photograph of Grace from 20 years ago, laughing at some long-forgotten joke, her apron dusted with flour, her eyes sparkling with life. She was the heart of this neighborhood, Mrs. Henderson said through tears. I want you to have this for Grace's Corner. We hung it on the wall, surrounded by other photos people brought. Grace at various community events. Grace teaching a children's baking class. Grace and me on our wedding day, so young and full of dreams. David Chin came up from Portland for the dedication. He brought with him a representative from the Oregon Historical Society who officially recognized Webb's Family Bakery as a cultural landmark. Your wife's partnership agreement with Northwest Heritage inspired us to create a new program, David explained. We're now offering the same protections to 20 other family businesses across Oregon and Washington. Grace's legacy is protecting dozens of families from predators like Trevor. She's still fighting that battle even now. I couldn't speak, could barely see through my tears. That night, after everyone had left and the bakery was quiet, Rachel and I sat in Grace's Corner, drinking coffee and eating slices of apple pie. The same recipe Grace had perfected over 47 years. Do you think she knows? Rachel asked quietly. About all of this? About Trevor's apology? About the bakery thriving? About us working together again? I smiled, feeling Grace's presence so strongly it was like she was sitting right there with us. I think she knew it would all work out this way before any of us did. She saw the whole chess game while we were still trying to understand the rules. Rachel laughed softly. She really was something special, wasn't she? She was everything, I said simply. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the last light fade from the autumn sky, and I realized something profound. Grace's greatest gift wasn't the partnership agreement or the evidence against Trevor or even the bakery itself. Her greatest gift was teaching us that love doesn't end when someone dies. It transforms. It becomes the strength we find when we're tested, the wisdom we carry forward, the courage to forgive, the determination to protect what matters, the grace to let go of what doesn't. But our story still had one final, unexpected chapter. 3 years after Grace's death, on an unremarkable Tuesday morning, I received a letter that would complete the circle in a way I never expected. The envelope was thick, official-looking, with a return address from a law firm in Boston I didn't recognize. My first thought was panic, some final legal complication from Trevor's bankruptcy. But when I opened it, I found something entirely different. It was a letter from Trevor's mother, Margaret, whom I'd met perhaps 5 times over the years. She'd always been kind but distant, clearly uncomfortable with her son's choices but unwilling to directly challenge him. The letter was handwritten, her elegant script filling 3 pages. Dear Marcus, I pray this letter finds you and Rachel well and healing. I wanted to reach out years ago after David Chen's company informed me of what Trevor had done to your family, but shame kept me silent. How does a mother apologize for raising a man who could do such terrible things? But silence is cowardice, and I've been a coward long enough. I'm writing now because I'm dying. Pancreatic cancer, much like what took your beautiful Grace. The doctors give me perhaps 6 months. And before I go, I needed you to know the truth about something Grace did that even she never told you about. 5 years ago, Grace came to visit me in Boston. She didn't tell you she was coming, did she? She told you it was a trip to see an old friend, which wasn't entirely a lie. She'd been my friend long before Trevor married Rachel. We'd bonded over recipes and gardening, 2 things my son never had patience for. Grace came to warn me. She told me Trevor was in trouble, that his business ventures were failing, that he was borrowing money he couldn't repay. She asked if I knew if I could help guide him before he destroyed himself and everyone around him. I was defensive, Marcus. I'm ashamed to admit it now, but I protected my son when I should have listened to her warnings. But Grace was persistent. She came back 6 months later. This time she brought evidence. Not to punish Trevor, but to show me the truth I'd been refusing to see. She showed me the ledger of loans. She played me that recording of Trevor trying to manipulate her in the hospital. And she cried, Marcus. She cried and said, Margaret, I'm dying. I probably have a year left at most. And I'm terrified of what Trevor will do to Marcus and Rachel when I'm not here to protect them. Please, help me protect my family. I helped her set up the partnership with Northwest Heritage. I used my connections in the Boston business community to facilitate the introduction to David Chen. I consulted with attorneys to make sure the contract was airtight. And I contributed financially to the partnership, though Grace swore me to secrecy about that part. She said you'd never accept help from Trevor's family, even if it came from me. I'm telling you this now because you deserve to know that Grace didn't do it alone. She built an army of people who loved her and believed in her mission to protect you. And because I want to make amends in the only way I can. I've established a trust fund in Rachel's name. It contains $150,000, approximately what Trevor stole from you plus interest. The money comes from my personal savings, not from any family accounts Trevor ever touched. It's my apology for the son I raised, and my tribute to the woman who tried so hard to save him from himself. Please don't refuse this, Marcus. Let me do this one thing right before I go. Let me help restore what my son took from you. Grace told me once, during one of her visits, that the measure of a person isn't whether they make mistakes but whether they try to make things right. I'm trying, Marcus. Perhaps too late, but I'm trying. With deep respect and regret, Margaret Mitchell. I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. Then I called Rachel into the office and read it to her. We both cried. For Grace's secret burden. For Margaret's guilt. For the complexity of families and forgiveness and the ripple effects of both cruelty and kindness. Should we accept it? Rachel asked quietly. I thought about Grace, about her pride and her practicality. About how she'd swallowed her own pride to ask Margaret for help because protecting her family mattered more than ego. Yes, I said. We accept it with gratitude. And we use it to expand Grace's corner. To help more people. To continue her legacy of making this bakery a place of safety and community. We wrote back to Margaret immediately, thanking her and inviting her to visit when she felt well enough. She came 3 months later, frail and thin but still graceful. We spent an afternoon together in Grace's corner, sharing stories and tears and forgiveness. Your wife saved my son from doing something far worse than he did, Margaret told me. If she hadn't set up those protections, if she hadn't stopped him when she did, Trevor would have committed fraud on a massive scale. He would have ended up in prison, dragging Rachel down with him. Grace's trap didn't just protect you, Marcus. It protected everyone, including Trevor himself. I'd never thought of it that way. But she was right. Margaret passed away peacefully 2 months after her visit. We attended her funeral, and Trevor was there, sober and quiet. We didn't speak, but we nodded to each other across the church, an acknowledgement of shared grief and complicated history. With Margaret's trust fund, we expanded Grace's Corner into a full community program. Free baking classes for single parents and struggling families, a scholarship program for culinary students, a meal assistance program for elderly neighbors who couldn't afford groceries. We named it all after Grace, of course. Grace's gift, a community kitchen. The local news came to do a story about it. They interviewed me in the kitchen, flour on my hands, surrounded by students learning to make bread. What do you think your wife would say about all this? The reporter asked. I thought about Grace, about her quiet strength and her loud heart. She'd probably say I'm using too much flour and not enough salt, I said with a laugh. But then she'd roll up her sleeves and help. That's who she was. Always helping. Always building. Always believing that one person could make the world a little bit warmer, one loaf of bread at a time. The reporter smiled. And what about the man who tried to take all this away? The son-in-law who betrayed you? Do you ever think about what happened with him? I think about what my wife taught me, I replied. That the opposite of love isn't hate. It's indifference. Hate still chains you to the person who hurt you. Indifference sets you free. I shaped a ball of dough with practiced hands. Trevor is indifferent to me now. He's a lesson I learned, not a wound I'm nursing. And that's exactly how it should be. That interview went viral, shared across the internet with headlines like Baker's Philosophy on Forgiveness, and Man Whose Wife Outsmarted Greedy Son-in-Law Shares Wisdom. Thousands of comments poured in. People sharing their own stories of betrayal and forgiveness. Of family members who'd tried to steal their businesses. Of spouses who'd manipulated them. Of the long, hard road to healing. Tell me in the comments what you think the most valuable legacy is. Money? Property? Or the wisdom to protect the people you love? And if you've dealt with something similar, share your story. You're not alone. Subscribe for more stories about standing your ground and reclaiming your life. Now, for years after Grace's death, I'm 73 years old. Rachel runs the bakery day to day, though I still show up most mornings to help with the bread. My hands aren't as steady as they used to be, and my knees complain about the early hours, but I can't imagine starting my day any other way. David Chin still visits twice a year. We've become genuine friends, bonded by our shared love for Grace's memory and our shared mission to protect family businesses. Trevor, I heard through mutual acquaintances, is still in Eugene. Still washing dishes. Still rebuilding. He sends a small payment toward his debt every few months. Never much, $50 or $100, but consistent. Rachel and I donate every payment to Grace's gift in his name. We figure Grace would appreciate the irony and the redemption. The bakery is thriving. Grace's Corner is always full. The community program serves hundreds of families every month. And every morning, when I unlock the door and turn on the lights and smell that first wave of yeast and flour and possibility, I feel Grace with me. Not as a ghost. Not as a memory. As a presence. As the foundation everything else is built on. Last week, a young woman came into the bakery. She was maybe 25, nervous, clearly struggling. She asked if we were hiring. Rachel was about to say no, we had a full staff, when I saw something in the girl's eyes that reminded me of Grace at that age. Hopeful. Determined. Fighting against odds I couldn't see but could somehow sense. What's your name? I asked. Sarah, she said quietly. Sarah Chin. No relation to David Chin, she added with a small smile. I get that a lot. Can you be here at 5 a.m. tomorrow, Sarah? Her face lit up. Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much. After she left, Rachel looked at me with raised eyebrows. Dad, we don't need another baker. We always need another baker, I corrected gently. Someone who needs us. Someone Grace would have given a chance to. Someone who might surprise us. Rachel smiled and shook her head. You're turning into her, you know. Making decisions with your heart instead of your spreadsheets. Good, I said. There are worse people to turn into. That night, I went home to the house I'd shared with Grace for 47 years. I made myself tea in her favorite cup, the one with the chipped handle she'd refused to throw away. I sat in her reading chair, the one that still held the faint impression of her body. And I talked to her the way I'd been doing every night for 4 years. "We did it, love," I said quietly. "We protected everything you built. The bakery's stronger than ever. Rachel's thriving. The community programs are changing lives. And I'm still here, still baking bread, still trying to be half the person you were." I paused, sipping my tea, feeling her presence wrap around me like a warm blanket. "Trevor showed up again last month, you know. Just briefly passing through town. He looks healthier. Sober. Humbled. He thanked me again for not pressing charges, for giving him a chance to rebuild his life quietly. I told him what you would have told him, that every day is a chance to be better than you were yesterday. That's all any of us can do." Outside my window, the Oregon sunset painted the sky in brilliant golds and purples. Somewhere in the neighborhood I could smell bread baking. The world kept turning. Life kept happening. "I know I'll see you again someday," I whispered. "And when I do, I hope you'll be proud of how I protected what we built. How I forgave when it was hard. How I loved our daughter back to wholeness. How I never, not for 1 second, let Trevor or anyone else destroy the legacy we created together." I finished my tea and sat in comfortable silence, feeling Grace's love as real and present as it had ever been. This story taught me that the greatest strength isn't in fighting back. It's in building something so solid, so well protected, so filled with love that no amount of greed or manipulation can tear it down. Grace didn't destroy Trevor. She didn't need to. She just built walls he couldn't scale and left me the keys to every door. That's love. That's legacy. That's the gift that keeps protecting us, long after the person who gave it has gone. And somewhere, I know Grace is smiling, her hands dusted with flour, her eyes full of that knowing wisdom, whispering what she always whispered when I doubted myself. "You've got this, my love. You've always had this." She was right. As always, she was right.